Okay, guys, grow the farm up. Busy day here at Lawver Seed Farms, but I wanted to take a minute to address a couple things. We're going to do it as simply as possible. We're going to talk about GMOs, non-GMOs, organics, and some different farming practices and my experience with them over the last 2 decades. So first, we're going to talk about GMOs, okay? And then we're going to talk about non-GMOs, and then we're going to talk about organics, and then we're going to talk about the all-important food labels. And we're also going to talk a little bit about farming practices such as conventional and regenerative and organic. Okay, now GMOs. The first thing I want to address is something called mycotoxins and pathogens. Mycotoxins and pathogens are one of the things that have been proven to be harmful to humans. They get into our plant or into our tissue, muscle tissue, into our bloodstream. Mycotoxins and pathogens have many cancer-causing agents. They cause inflammation. You don't want to eat a lot of mycotoxins. And if you've ever been involved in feeding cattle, livestock, anything, or producing food products, one of the first things they test for is mycotoxins. That's right. And oftentimes an area or on any given production year, an area and its feed value is determined on the test levels of mycotoxins. Okay, so GMOs were first brought along to prevent mycotoxins by engineering a synthetic protein called Bacillus thuringiensis into the genome of a plant, otherwise known as BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and that is genetically modified into the genome of the plant to make the plant emit that protein, and it's simply a synthetic recreation of a naturally occurring protein in the soil, okay, that the plant emits that harmful insects cannot digest. Now that is, and the number one reason that came along was an effort to reduce the level of mycotoxins. Now, whether you agree or disagree, whether I agree or disagree, that's not the purpose of this discussion today. What we're going to talk about is basically the different ways that these foods are produced, the practices used, the science behind them, how they're conditioned, how they're processed, and how they get from the farm to your table, and what are you actually eating when you talk about this stuff. So with GMOs, you're eating a genetically modified synthetic protein that has been genetically modified into the genome of the plant to be resistant to insects. Now, it does not appear that it's harmful to humans. We've all been eating them for 20 some years, but there's obviously a lot of disagreement about that. I'm not here to try to tell you I think one way is better or worse. I'm here to explain to you about the different practices and methodologies behind it. One of the reasons I started this channel, I think it's extremely important that people have the freedom of choice to choose for themselves. So get yourself educated and decide what you want to eat. I've had a number of comments and different people request that I just put this down real quick. I'm in the middle of work today, I got about 15 minutes here. Thought I'd just stop by the whiteboard and see how I do. Okay, so GMOs. That's what GMOs are. And a lot of people don't like those. Okay, so your next option, non-GMOs. With non-GMOs, they obviously don't have the insect resistance built into the plant. So what do you get when you eat GMOs? Well, you got to spray more pesticides. Okay, now we're not talking about gallons of pesticides. We're talking about ounces an acre. It would be like taking a 20-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola and spreading it out over an entire football field of your favorite college or professional team. An acre, give or take, about a football field, give or take, okay? So you're talking about 20 ounces or less across an entire football field. You're not talking about a lot. But nonetheless, let's have our little plant tissue over here, okay? Yep, when you spray pesticides on a plant tissue, a little pesticide sprayed on there, and guess what? Theoretically, that could make it through onto your dinner plate in an infinitesimal amount. I don't want to downplay pesticides. I understand people's concerns with them. They are a chemical. I mean, but you're going to have a minute, like parts per billion amount of pesticides that could potentially make it through onto your dinner plate, okay? So the question then becomes, moving on to organics. Okay, with organics, obviously they have no Bt GMOs in them, okay? They've got none, the organics have no GMOs in them, and you cannot spray pesticides, at least these types of pesticides. They do allow you to spray certain types of organically labeled pesticides, though there's also a lot of disagreement about what an organically labeled pesticide is. What does an organic pesticide actually consist of? But they do allow organic farmers to spray pesticides on their crops sometimes. Yes, they do. Don't ever let anyone tell you that they don't. And the reason they do that is because if a food product becomes, especially an organic food product or a non-GMO product, has an infestation of insects, it's actually potentially and most likely probably healthier for that producer to spray pesticides on that organics to take care of the insect issue, to keep the level of mycotoxins down, okay? And so with organics, that is really the trade-off. It's really simple, Now, let's talk about how mycotoxins and pathogens get into this plant tissue over here with me. All right? There's a number of ways pathogens and mycotoxins can get into a plant tissue. Let's draw a little bug here. Give him some happy little legs, Bob Ross style, okay? He lands on that plant tissue. He takes a big old chomping bite out of it. Now all of a sudden there's a hole in that plant tissue. Anytime you tear open a plant tissue, it opens it up to all different types of mycotoxins that the insect may be carrying, or that could be an airborne or a soil-borne pathogen. Okay, pathogens and mycotoxins are, once they get into the food supply, they will mutate and replicate. They're much like any other virus, which might be kind of relevant to what's going on in the world today. Okay, so mycotoxins and pathogens are a major issue. So how do they get into your plant tissue? Well, insects are one of the number one reasons, one of the number one issues. Okay, now there's also weather. Hail could come along and poke a hole through that plant leaf right there, hail hole, and now all of a sudden what happens is that hail has ripped that plant tissue open, opening it up to any soil or airborne pathogens. And insects are just like human beings. What goes in one end comes out the other. So this insect has landed on your plant tissue. He's taken a bite, he's eaten, and it's coming out the other side. And that's what really cranks up the amount of pathogens and mycotoxins that can get into your actual produce that makes it to your dinner plate. Just as I said, if you spray a little trace amount of pesticide on a plant tissue, it could theoretically make it onto your dinner plate in a very small parts per billion, most likely. And with organics, you have no protection against these mycotoxins. So it's a really simple trade-off. Do you want to eat mycotoxins or trace pesticides or GMO Bt protein? Okay, with GMOs, you're eating the genetically modified Bacillus thuringiensis protein that is not digestible for harmful insects, and seems to be that it does not have harmful effects on humans, though there are wide varying opinions on that. I'm not here to convince you of any of these different methodologies. I'm here to try to explain to you my experience 20 years working with them. When I first started farming, biotech and GMOs were the big thing in the mid-late 90s. That was when they were first coming onto the market. And why did they come onto the market? To try to reduce the level of mycotoxins, okay? Now, with non-GMO, let's say you've decided, I don't like GMOs. I don't trust it, I don't like the modern science, and I don't think we've been eating them long enough to know. Let's say that's your position. That's absolutely fine. So you pick non-GMOs. And you always look for things that say non-GMO and you don't like GMOs. If that's your choice, that's absolutely fine. The non-GMO market is a growing market, okay? Well, and then instead of eating the genetically modified BT protein, you're going to be eating more sprayed on the plant tissue pesticides, and that's your trade-off. Now with organics, you're eating absolutely none of the GMO BT protein, and you're getting supposedly no pesticides unless there's a humongous outbreak and then they allow them to spray organic pesticides. It's important to note that organic pesticides are not the same as the pesticides that allow you to spray on conventional type farming with non-GMOs. But nonetheless, they still are pesticides. So with organics now, you've got essentially, you're not eating pesticides, you're not eating any BT GMO or any other genetically manipulated stuff, but you've opened yourself up and you're going to probably eat quite a few more mycotoxins. So it's your choice. What is healthier for you and your family, and what do you guys want to eat? You want to take your chances on a little bit of mycotoxins? You want to eat non-GMO and potentially have a few more pesticides on there? Or do you want to eat the BT protein and GMOs? You know, it's your choice. Now, food labels, okay? There's a lot of products out there that don't have a GMO alternative. Let's use bananas as an example. And they labeled it, so there's no such thing as a GMO banana. So there's no GMO alternative. And yet I see bananas in the grocery store labeled non-GMO. Why? Because just like the news, okay, the news's job is not to bring you the news. I know, it might be hard to believe. The job of any news channel is to get views. That's how they pay their bills. Well, guess what, folks? All of these different marketplaces are businesses. They're trying to get you to eat their product. Organics people are going to tell you GMOs are bad. Buy organics. People that love GMOs are going to tell you organics are bad. Buy GMOs. The non-GMO market oftentimes will tell you don't eat GMOs. They're bad. Non-GMOs are the way to go. So when you understand that and you recognize, how much, the news is manipulated, these are all just sectors of an economy competing for your dollar. Okay, and it turns out in these food labels. Now, what have I learned over 20 years of growing GMOs, non-GMOs, organics, farming using conventional farming practices, farming using regenerative farming practices, and farming using organic farming practices? What have I learned in 20 years? Well, conventional farming practices are just that. They are essentially the way 90% of the country farms today, conventionally, using synthetic fertilizers and synthetic herbicides and different chemicals to kill weeds and pesticides and fungicides and things like that. And I'm not here to argue whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. It's conventional farming. Now there is regenerative farming. And I've got about 4 or 5 videos on my channel. Look those up. I'm not going to dive into the entire rabbit hole of regenerative farming in this video, but this is essentially using Mother Nature's natural biodiversity, doing things like crop rotation. There are crops that you can plant that Mother Nature produces its own natural nitrogen, folks. Plant your own nitrogen and then rotate into a crop that needs nitrogen. And we found farming conventionally awful tough to make a living doing that, because you spend so much money on synthetic fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides and fungicides, okay? And regenerative farming done right, once you get the system moving and once you get your soils regenerating, because it's important to understand through conventional farming and things like continuous application of anhydrous ammonia and the non-stop just spraying of petrochemicals, and most importantly, conventional tillage practices have degraded the resource of our soil. And so a lot of guys are starting to wise up and switch over, and regenerative farming is not new. It's as old as Mother Nature itself. It's just utilizing Mother Nature's natural biodiversity. Look at a forested area. Nobody ever sprayed any fertilizer or chemicals on a forested area, and the trees are 100 feet tall. So apparently Mother Nature's natural biodiversity knows what it's doing. And a lot of farmers are starting to wake up and recognize this. And growing regeneratively the right way, okay, is, I think, almost better than organic. Now, it's very tough to be an organic farmer and a regenerative farmer at the same time. It's hard to do that because organic farming is very labor intensive. And if you are going to make the choice that organics are what you want you and your family to eat, be prepared to pay twice as much, times 2, sometimes more, because it takes a lot more soil tillage and a lot more management and a lot more manpower and it takes a lot more to grow a good, healthy, organic crop. And one of the reasons that you have to do more soil tillage is you have no herbicide or spray options. It's very difficult to be a no-till or regenerative organic farmer. Not impossible. Now, I would argue there are some guys out there that are regeneratively organic farming. Once you get the regenerative farming system going and get your soils regenerating, get into a natural crop rotation, I would argue that the regenerative farming is probably better than straight organic. You really are almost an organic farmer if you're regeneratively farming. Okay, I would prefer to eat food grown on a regeneratively used farming practice food plot than I would an organic product. And again, that's just my personal choice. You guys decide for yourself. So again, the number one reason that we have all of these different labels today is what? Money. You think Fox News is trying to tell you the truth? You think MSNBC is trying to tell you the truth? You know, ladies and gentlemen, just like in politics and news, make up your own mind. Make up your own mind. I wanted to make a quick video and just show you guys, just to recap, okay? There's some different farming practices, conventional farming practices. Those use a lot of GMOs and non-GMOs, okay? There's regenerative farming practices. Look those up on my channel. You're going to see a lot of really great information on it. Regenerative Ag 101. I've got that video and a couple other videos of walking around in some fields and showing you guys how we're regeneratively farming, planting cover crops, and it generally food grown in healthier soil. It starts with the soil. Food grown in healthier soil is going to produce a healthier end result. That's why I'm more concerned with the nutrient density, you know, of our food, nutrients, and the farming practices. I'll just put FP, farming practices and nutrient density of our food. That's what I'm more concerned with. My family, okay, just to give you an idea, if I had only one of these choices to pick, I would probably go with innovation and modern science. That's just my opinion. Okay, decide for yourself and comment about how much of a GMO, you know, how much you hate me if you don't like GMOs. I would choose that over my family eating mycotoxins or pesticides, you know, and or mycotoxins, pathogens, and pesticides. Now, non-GMOs, you know, nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of products out there that are not GMOs. They've just never been genetically modified. And so, you know, we're eating, you know, people that think that, you know, only GMOs are the way to go. I've met people on both ends of the spectrum. As I've told you, these are businesses, man. The organics companies are trying to tell you, oh my God, don't eat those GMOs because they want your dollars in their pocket. And these GMO people up here are telling you, don't go for those organics, and those non-GMOs are suspect because they want your dollars in their pocket up there. And the non-GMO market kind of is, I guess you'd call almost the middle ground, is kind of going both ways. You know, but they want your dollars in their pocket. So it's all about reducing the mycotoxins and pathogens. There's no question that mycotoxins are harmful to humans, no question. And pathogens, there's a lot of cancer-causing agents in mycotoxins and pathogens, okay? I mean, that can't be stressed enough. And then really it comes down to how to best reduce that. So GMOs came along to try to reduce mycotoxins. In non-GMOs, we use pesticides to try to reduce mycotoxins. In organics, a lot of people that like organics are food purists. That's fantastic. Good for you. I mean, who doesn't want the purest food they can eat? But I know a lot of people that really like organics that are so in love with the idea and or so almost indoctrinated into the dogma of organics that they believe that they're so right they don't want to hear any opinions that disagree with their own, and they really kind of stop, they kind of forget to stop and take a look at the facts. Okay, I'm not telling you that GMOs are better or worse or organics are better or worse. In my 20 years of farming all different ways, GMOs, non-GMOs, organics, farming conventionally, farming regeneratively, farming organically, and using lots of soil tillage. I mean, I've learned many valuable lessons over the years. So as a food consumer and a food producer, you know, this is basically where my family's at today. We're not at the point that we seek out 100% organic food. Being a food producer and knowing what I know, I would not want my family eating 100% organic food and produce all the time. Just because studies show there is a higher level of mycotoxins and pathogens in them. So we eat primarily conventional foods in the Lauber house, okay? Now, that being said, my wife will often bring home a package that says organic on it, and it's not because she was necessarily seeking it out or not seeking it out. There's just a lot of products that are labeled, everything's labeled all natural and non-GMO and things like this to try to grab your attention to get your dollars, okay? I'm explaining to you the different trade-offs. There is no 100% scientific consensus. I haven't seen any data, either lab data and scientific studies and or my own experiences. I can't stand here and tell you today that with 100% beyond a reasonable doubt, anything on this board is better than the other. Okay, this channel I started is because there's so much information and misinformation out there about what's in your food supply. Okay, I want you to educate yourselves, and it's paramount that we understand that all three of these are viable. And people that believe in organics, they need to eat. So guess what? We fill that marketplace and we do it well. People that want non-GMOs, guess what? They need to eat. We fill that marketplace and we do it well. And people that like GMOs, guess what? They need to eat and we fill that marketplace just as well. Now, the last thing I want to touch on, folks that are really big into organics and non-GMOs, I want you to switch your thinking over to farming practices. Farming practices, okay? Just because the label says organic doesn't mean it's healthier or that it was farmed better. I want you all to check out my video about regenerative agriculture, because that is going to be the future of agriculture, and that's going to regenerate our soils, create healthier soils, and it doesn't matter whether you're planting GMOs, non-GMOs, or organics. If you're farming it regeneratively, healthier soils are going to make healthier foods. And also remember, this is a business, okay? And remember how mycotoxins can get into the plant tissue. It's very important that all of these different methodologies are all based around what is the best way to get the healthiest food supply. Some people have decided, I don't trust the GMOs and I don't want the pesticides. I want food that's quote unquote 100% natural. Well, that's okay. Get ready to eat some bug poop in the form of mycotoxins and pathogens. And that is my quick 2 cents. We've got a busy day here. I had about 10-15 minutes to sit down and stand up and lay this out. I think I've covered it as best as I can. Always remember, folks, this is a business. Don't be swayed by fancy gimmicks and food labels. Get educated about what these three different things mean, which I just did for you. And then really let's look at farming practices into the future and understand that organic farming practices can often be less healthy for the soil than conventional farming practices. Just because you're not spraying a pesticide on it or a herbicide on it doesn't mean it's better for the soil. And remember, soil health is what leads to healthier food. All right, this has been your Grow the Farm Up Quick GMO, non-GMO, organic, and regenerative farming learning minute. I gotta get back to work. I think I've got a mill running and about 6 guys running around here probably wondering where I'm at. Thanks, I hope you enjoyed it. Grow the Farm Up.